The diary of Anne Frank is the story of 8 Jews who hid from the Nazis for more than 2 years during World War II. And this story is based on Anne Frank's historical diary, in which the then 13-year-old girl, who ended up being 15 by the time that 2-year period ended, she describes how her family of 4, plus another family of 3, plus a single man, that's 8 people, shared a few attic rooms over a factory in Amsterdam. A Dutch family fed and housed these 8 Jews and bravely defied the Germans. Well, while secluded, Anne and her family experienced deprivation and unbearable tension. Every day they wondered if this was the day the Nazis would find them and drag them off to a concentration camp. Can you imagine that tension every day for 2 years? They had to be completely silent during the day, during the working hours of the factory below them, because if a factory worker heard them, they could report them. And so only after the workers left each day could they use the one bathroom. Could they prepare dinner? Could they move around in the rooms? All of them grew thin physically, and they all experienced despair and depression. Before they were caught by the Nazis and sent to the concentration camps where Anne Frank would die, Anne is talking to another family member who is in hiding with her, and she says this. She says, "I know it's terrible trying to have any faith when people are doing such horrible things. But you know what I sometimes think? I think that the world may be going through a phase. It will pass. I still believe, in spite of everything, that people are really good at heart. We're just going through a phase." She says, "I believe, in spite of everything, that people are really good at heart." That's one human philosophy. Now compare that human philosophy of human nature with the following story. This story is written by Kay Warren. It's not really a story, it's her reflections. Kay Warren, who is Pastor Rick Warren's wife, she wrote the following reflection after her first trip to Rwanda in Africa. She says, "The first time I visited Rwanda, I went looking for monsters, albeit a different category of monster, the kind that isn't relegated to B movies. I had heard about the 1994 genocide in Rwanda that left 1 million people dead, tortured, raped, and viciously beaten. And somehow I thought it would be easy to spot the perpetrators. I naively assumed that I would be able to look men and women in the eyes and tell if they had been involved. What I found left me puzzled, confused, and ultimately frightened. Instead of finding leering, menacing creatures, I met men and women who looked and behaved a lot like me. They took care of their families. They went to work. They chatted with their neighbors. They laughed. They cried. They prayed. They worshiped. Where were the monsters? Where were the evildoers capable of such horrible acts? Slowly, with a deepening sense of dread, I understood the truth. There were no monsters in Rwanda. There were only people like you and me. Before that trip, I can't tell you the number of times I reacted to the evil that I read about or witnessed by saying, I would never do that. But thousands of years of bloody human history have proven differently. And 54 years of my own history prove differently. We are all proficient in the ability to conceive, plan, and execute evil. Of course, we don't call it evil when we're involved, but it is. You might as well face the shameful truth. You and I, put in the right situation, will do absolutely anything. Given the right circumstances, I am capable of any sin. She closes by saying, I have grown more afraid of the monster lurking in the dark corners of my own soul than any monster lurking in the dark corners of my house. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the Russian writer, says, if only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were only necessary to separate us from them and then destroy them. But the dividing line between good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. Human beings are basically good by nature, or human beings are basically sinful by nature. These are two different philosophies of the nature of human beings. And they are the two philosophies that are at the heart of our Bible text for today, the passage that was just read by Ruth. As a church, we've been reading through the New Testament, the 27 books of the New Testament, 27 in 2011, and our reading schedule has brought us this past week to Mark chapter 7. And on an initial reading of this passage, it appears that Jesus and some Pharisees and teachers of the law are arguing about some insignificant Jewish hand-washing rituals. Pharisees are upset because the disciples didn't wash their hands before they ate dinner. But in fact, Jesus and these religious leaders are arguing about some of the most profound, some of the most important concepts that we can understand as human beings. Our passage this morning, where Jesus and the Pharisees are arguing, they're not arguing about hand washing. They're arguing about three powerful concepts. They're arguing about the nature of human beings. They're arguing about how human beings should relate to God. And they're arguing about how human beings should relate to each other. That's what we're dealing with in this passage. Not about whether their hands were clean when they passed the potatoes. As we've been reading through the New Testament, and we've finished Matthew and we're partway through Mark now, we've seen how the religious leaders are upset with Jesus. They're upset with him because Jesus has angered them, because his teaching has been contrary to much of their teaching, and they are threatened by his influence with the people. And in fact, by the time we get to our passage for this morning in Mark chapter 7, the Pharisees have thrown off the gloves. They're bare-knuckle fighting with Jesus. They're not pretending. They're upset with him. And what they're doing at this point in Jesus' ministry is they have Pharisees and teachers of the law following Jesus everywhere he goes, watching everything he does, listening to everything he teaches, and they're hoping to catch him up in some mistake so they can discredit his ministry and prove that he's not worthy to follow, not worthy to listen to. In verse 2 of our passage for this morning, in Mark chapter 7, the Pharisees think they have something. They think they've caught Jesus slipping up, and they jump on it. And before the crowd, they point out that in verse 2 that Jesus' Jewish disciples, are not ceremonially washing their hands before they ate their food. The Pharisees saw it. They saw the disciples not washing their hands.